I will share my slide right now. I hope it will work. Yes, perfect. And we can dive directly into the content so we can have a panel together. So if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Medjaoui. I'm the founder and chairman of Apidays conferences. And let's say I try to be a good API advocate and API evangelist for the company, as I believe they're the angular stone of the digital transformation. And when you design APIs, you design the words that comes with it. So better interface for a better place. I often start the thing about API product management and continuous API product management by really quoting this famous Silicon Valley saying, like, there are only two business models: bundling or unbundling. And especially in software, we know it thanks to this great XKCD drawing. We go from monolith software to component software to rebundle them into monolith software, that because management of smaller pieces is too hard, and then after it's too slow or too slow to evolve, and then we slice them and cut them into smaller pieces. And this is the history of the last 70 years of software. And I think we are currently in an unbundling era, breaking the monolith, cutting large software that was doing everything into smaller piece of software that just do one thing. And actually, we know this, right? We know this, and actually it's quoted by CEO and founder of Twilio. The world is getting broken down into APIs, as every part of the stack of business that a developer might need to build is eventually turning into APIs that developers can use. He founded Twilio, a piece of software delivered by an API that handle the communication workflow and processes inside the company. It can be SMS, it can be video, it can be customer engagement. And he's actually one piece of the global supply chain. And I often use this slide to explain a little bit what's happening on the web and why and how APIs now are a product. We used to see, let's say, in the early 19th century, car manufacturers were handling everything themselves. They have no supplier. They were their own supplier for all the pieces of a car. As the car market grew, there was opportunity for new companies to build small pieces of a car that could be embedded into everybody else's car, every car manufacturer. And so at some point, that was a specialization that the car manufacturer didn't have to manage. It could embed other people value proposition as a service. Of course, it was physical product, but he could contractualize with themselves and have them as contractors or as suppliers. This is exactly what we see on the digital infrastructure. We see more than thousands of services delivered by APIs that now company integrate as product, bundle them into delivering a new product to be embedded by someone else. This is exactly what's happening, and this is why APIs are no products. But APIs are IT component; they are software, and you can see that you can compare them to Lego bricks. And this is why I want really to share with you from mostly from the book, like how we can go from API to value proposition interface, about the 10 pillars of your continuous API product management. So this is your API product. Your API product belongs to 10 pillars. As Mike quoted some of them, it goes from strategy to design to documentation, development, testing, deployment, security, monitoring, discovery, and change. And how do you change? You change according to your strategy. And then you design, you document, you develop, and testing. So it's not a full life cycle. There are really pillars, but let's say they are bundled into the same practice of API product management. And yes, in a digital and programmable world, working with larger companies about API strategy and APIs, it's the big shift that they did not get is that IT is not just supporting the business anymore. IT was a support function like HR or like internal affairs. IT is now the business. IT is now the business. And this is what sometimes they didn't get. But sometimes we remind them that if you think in terms of Lego bricks, like you propose capabilities directly, your software capabilities directly to others by APIs, they will integrate and consume the APIs in the value proposition they see from your interface. So the interface is not just an application programming interface. In a digital economy, it's a value proposition interface. The same two bricks can have different perceived value for different type of users. So you have to manage the unicity and the uniform interface you want to provide, but you have to be sure you express it in a way that drives people to the value proposition they want to have. A weather data API, is it great for weather? Or maybe it can be a prediction for my business if I'm an ice cream shop. If it's good weather, I will sell more. If it's bad weather, I will sell less. So a weather data API can be just delivering weather broadcast, but it could be an insurance about small businesses, a turnover or revenue, because I will staff less people, I will have less orders or supplies because of the weather the next few days. So you can see the value proposition for the same piece of software and the same API can be totally different. And this is why we need to think them in terms of product. And for the one who don't believe in it, these companies just deliver as only product. They deliver APIs. So of course, that's one of the top companies. But again, Stripe, a payment API, is worth, for example, twice more than the top European bank. Just an example. And they just deliver APIs. They don't have like end user customers at the end. They have end users, but not direct customers, B2C customers. So just to tell you, delivering only APIs to be embedded in other people application is a business model, a programmable business model that works, and you need to think your APIs in terms of product. Welcome in the as-a-service economy, or in other words, the API economy. But as not everybody understands API economy, sometimes we call it the as-a-service economy. But every time you will use a software that belongs to someone else as a product inside your own capabilities, you are actually participating into the API economy. So first, let's start with strategy, the first pillar. So again, you have to understand that APIs are not a strategy. They're a mean to achieve the strategy. So first, what's the company strategy? What do you want to achieve? Do you want to be a platform? Do you want to be a marketplace? Do you want onboard new partners? Do you want to drive more traffic? What are your OKRs and KPIs are really what you need to think in for your API strategy. If you want to be a marketplace, maybe you want to open specific assets to selected partners, so they can benefit from your audience or your value and on niche you can't address. If you have a business model based on ads or customer attention, you may want to make the API free to augment the ecosystem of application driving to your main website. If you have important assets that you want to monetize, you can make directly API monetization by selling directly the API capability. It really depends about what you want to drive, but the strategy is really the key, and you have to understand that the company needs to be ready to adapt platform or ecosystem models that APIs enable. So strategy is really the first pillar. The second pillar is really the design aspect of your APIs. Let's remind, as Mike also said earlier, that APIs is just the interface, the instance that manages the interface to the service. You can have one API for multiple services. You can have one service, one API. You can have multiple API for the same service. In the past, I've seen some XML SOAP API or REST JSON API for the same service, but actually for different, for the hotels industry or for the airline industry who prefer one versus the other. So again, the API is just the interface instances that enable to access the service. So let's remind that in terms of product. So about the design, yes, we need to understand what's the business context of my APIs. What are maybe the company style guide that we need to build or to respect? Who is deciding actually how do we choose name, vocabularies, format, protocols? Who are the persons who should be involved in API design? What's the API style I must choose, as Eric just presented? That's all the question important for the design of the APIs. Again, you represent a value proposition. You represent capabilities that will be embedded by other internally or externally in your application. Be sure you put yourself in the other shoes. You don't stay too much in your ego system, but you think in terms of ecosystem. You put yourself in other people's shoes. And I love this idea from Arnaud Loré on his book, The Design of Web APIs. He calls it the 4 levels of API design consistency. Are my APIs consistent with themselves? I call on endpoints and method. Like, are they consistent? It's not just I express a good design toward customer needs or consumer needs, but are they consistent? Do I respect all naming and all vocabularies and all path according to my current APIs or object models? are they consistent with other API of the company? Other APIs that are produced on the same platform or other company, they need to be consistent for nobody to be scared by working with you. Are they consistent with other API in the same industry? Do I respect like global vocabulary or naming or specific regulations that are in place? And then, are they consistent with global common practice? Did I invent my own authentication, authorization model? Did I respect some REST principles or GraphQL if I use GraphQL, whatever? But yeah, do I respect like main principles so developers are not surprised by what I do? These are all the questions you will ask yourself on design. The third is documentation. And let's remind that the documentation, there's no API if there is no documentation. Some people argue with that, but let's say real. Documentation is key to understand how to interact. Documentation is like the menu of a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant and you don't have any menu, it's really hard to know what you can order from the kitchen. If you have a menu and a waiter that describes you what's available, now it's easier to know what you can ask and what you will get if you ask it. That's the same idea with documentation. So documentation, you can see it as the menu and all the waiter information when you are at a restaurant about what's available. You have to remind that the documentation needs to answer many different personas. You have the developer who is here to get started. You have the developer who has started, but who is here to fix a bug. You have maybe the manager evaluating other competing APIs, like the one who will make decisions. And you have maybe the one looking for a new value proposition that maybe your API can provide. So your documentation has to answer all of this as a product. It's exactly like a product. You have the same for the one who discovered it, the one who wants to reuse it, or the one who decide between different ones. An important aspect, like a product, but you have really the way to describe how it works. You have two approaches: the tell, don't teach approach. Like just imagine the Lego bricks, but without instructions. It's mostly like the API reference, or something. You just explain how it works, the overview, and you just tell. You don't teach how to use it. You just explain how it works for the one who knows already how to use it, the one he's already taught about it. So this is like a dictionary, or for people who wants to, you don't want any bias or whatever in there. But you have also the teach, don't tell approach that is important for helping people who may not have ideas or imagination about how to make it work. That's the one with instructions to follow step by step so you can achieve something toward a specific goal. So are you do you prefer Lego bricks without instruction or with instructions? Just for the story, Lego have found that the with instructions is sold a lot more than the without instructions. Even the without instructions enable more imagination. But what does that mean for documentation? That means that you can deliver an open API document, or a Swagger, as we used to say, a kind of API, like just with get, post, put, patch, delete, instructions and methods, just to know exactly if you send that, this is what API gives back as a response. But that's the minimum viable documentation. That's at least people will be able to figure it out. It will take more time or more energy, but they will be able to figure it out, whatever the use case. If you have specific use case, you can take an example on Stripe Docs, but here, this is an example of developer documentation. But here you have accept online payments, create a subscription, receive outputs. They push you, they teach you specific tunnels about like use cases that they know you're probably here to do. It's like the Lego with instructions. So the level 0 of documentation is probably the reference and to just tell, don't teach, but the above level of documentation is really the teach, don't tell approach. You really guide developers toward the right direction, who is probably the use case they want to have. Again, thinking in terms of product, you need to have the product like some smartphones. They need to be easy to handle and to start with. So really low documentation. But the one who wants advanced feature, you need at some point to have support, or you have documentation to know exactly how to use it deeply. That's exactly the same idea. Then it's the development. Few advice on development to make it to simplify your development. You use frameworks. Sometimes the gateways, platform management platform already have design tools or whatever. Or depending on the language, you can have different frameworks to build APIs. Don't reinvent the wheel. This is my advice. And again, develop against single source of truth for API definition. Whatever it's a polling API or event-driven API, whatever Eric just described. The more you will be close to a single source of truth, the more you will, let's say, have a facility to develop against the API in a collaborative way and avoid mistakes. So development is also part of to be sure that the interface always reflects the latest technical version of the capability you expose. The testing aspect, really few stuff on testing, but the testing, you have really different layers of testing, from the unit testing to the API tests to the integration test to the UI test. Sometimes you can have developer experience testing, but just be sure that the API testing strategy, testing the interface level, the object, the methods, the versions, and everything is always secured by a good unit test base. So like this, if the unit tests are well respected, you will know that if an error comes, it comes from upper level and probably the API layer test. And again, a good API testing will also enable to know if the an integration test fails, if it comes or not from the API directly. So again, in testing, you need to be sure that you integrate tests into your CI/CD processes, and also to be sure that the interface always reflect the capabilities you want to provide with the latest version. About deployment, so a few things about deployment. Most of the API management platform allow you to deploy directly on the cloud, on different cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, whatever. There is also some new API ops practice where you integrate directly into your CI/CD pipeline about the API. So just to be sure, in a product manner, in an IT product, you deliver as fast as something is new. You capitalize on every development you make. There is also this new service mesh idea powered by containerization and Kubernetes that enable you also to think differently about deploying a new version, deploying instances or micro instances of the services that are powered by API. So be sure you understand, you integrate that into your system. You also have serverless capabilities. Some platforms enable you just to publish the service and they handle the runtime and they handle everything. So it can be accessible by an API directly. That's also a way to export the runtime into serverless. And some platforms also enable you to publish your API in a low-code or no-code manner, like API orchestration. So you deploy your API, but it will be able to be used and mixed with other APIs. So depending on your strategy, more internal or external developers, or more like in a business citizen developer approach, you can decide about your deployment strategy. About security, few things. So about security as a product, don't surprise people, don't surprise developer. Use main standards, authorization standard like OAuth2, OpenID Connect. If you are in a financial world, you can use financial API grade like FAPI. And also be sure that the OWASP security top 10 on APIs are respected. And in the book, you will be able to discover in depth the 14 API security principles, from confidentiality, for example, to be sure that what you expose is what needs to be exposed and you don't overexpose things that should not. The least API privilege, for example, to be sure you give always the minimum privilege to someone asking for authorization. Psychological acceptability, for example, to be sure that the security you put is acceptable in terms of integration, and you can go in other parts. API defense in depth, to be sure that you have different layers of security to, in case of attack, minimize surface attack. Fail API securely, be sure when it fails in a way that is not contaminating the system. And so you will, in the book, you will be able to discover them all in more depth. Well, then we arrive on monitoring. On monitoring is about what metrics and analytics do you have? Do you monitor calls, signups, value of integration or number of apps, direct revenues, number of end user tokens, indirect revenues, ecosystem and marketplace activity? You can see that the KPIs for APIs can be really different. Again, as a product, you want to know how it's used, where it's used, by who it's used, and for what type of use case. Maybe your users are discovering a use case you didn't even think about, that maybe your marketing team will love to discover. So enabling like to have these KPIs and to be gathered can help you also to think about your next version of your API product. So use your users to also do your kind of research or research and development. And then about the monitoring aspect, the performance aspect, is like you will have to ask the question like, how do I monitor APIs? How do I check performance? What are the SLA that I provide to user? Is this critical? So my user will ask it as a product, will ask it to be sure it works. Again, what's the process when the API is down? All the things that are needed to handle in a product manner. And we'll finish with the last two, the discovery aspect. Today, currently, most of the discovery is done via developer portals. You will need, as a product, the developer portal is the first impression with your new users. Like you need to onboard developers, getting them started. It's a hub for all resources, the point of contact of communication. It's about the policy and the business model is made for your product. So it's extremely key to have a good first experience, like some company invest on unboxing. You've seen all these video about unboxing. Unboxing is an experience, and discovering the API on the developer portal is also an experience about trustworthiness and the value that will be proposed later. Will we have a search engine for APIs? Good question. Not yet, but let's say it may be coming in the next years if we kind of change the design of APIs we build. We need more links into all of this. You can go on the Dev Portal Awards to see the best developer portals that have been created. And I'll just show you, for example, the BBVA developer portal. You can see that their APIs are actually bundled into product, like customer accounts, business cards, payments, loans, notification, directly with a product segmentation and a product boundaries. But the best way to describe maybe promotion discovery is Bruno Pedro, quote from 2015: API discovery is a combination of pure luck and word of mouth. Sometimes it's a little bit like that, like B2B software. Sometimes it's really hard to discover API, so promotion is important, but sometimes it's just a classic software promotion, unfortunately. I'll just finish by showing, I just finished on this slide, on this next two slides. So API as a product. So why do you need to think API in terms of product? Behind a product, you have a name, a baseline, some instructions to how to use it correctly, the safety logo, security cap to be sure only adults can open the bottle, barcode, recycling logos, word of caution. All the pillars will actually be transcribed into APIs. So APIs will probably need a name to be discoverable, a baseline to describe their value for discovery and promotion. The instructions are the documentation and the tutorials. The safety logos is the API testing. The security cap is the API security and policy mechanism. The barcode is the business model and the monitoring for rate limit and payments. The recycling logo is the versioning strategy. How do you version APIs? And maybe the word of caution is the term of services, to avoid misuse of the API. Last but not least, we released this morning the API landscape, the 1,000 API tools that you can use to power your API products. Sometimes, if you don't have the skills internally to handle all the pillars, there are some tools that can help you on the design or documentation or deployment. So I invite you to go on the API landscape that we released this morning, just to be sure to find the tools that can compensate the lack of skills for certain pillars.